Succession planning is a critical aspect of making sure that a transition for a business goes smoothly. It refers to the process of identifying and assessing the critical aspects of your organization and appointing the appropriate individuals to take hold of those positions and lead your organization into a prosperous future after your pending exit. It allows you to take a holistic view of current and future goals and the type of preparation it'll take to ensure that you have the right people in place to execute a vision now and into the future. And according to a national survey released by Scotiabank in October of 2024, it found that 31% of small business owners across Canada are planning to sell their businesses by 2030. The survey also revealed that 65% of Canadian small business owners have a succession plan in place, and that 43% of today's business owners plan to exit their businesses within the next 6 months. For my friend Stephanie Hayes, she works with small business owners and other entrepreneurs to effectively exit their business and come up with a victorious succession plan. Stephanie is the founder of Assets to Exits, which aims to give established business owners a pathway from revenue to wealth and to plan an eventual exit from their business. Hayes says there's far too much conversation in the business community around starting and the early growth of a business, but not as much chatter around the subject of established business owners and businesses which become viable and profitable while their owners may become stagnant, uninspired, and lacking direction. Hayes works with business owners who want to leverage their business acumen to start their next chapter in life. She says that business exits don't always have to be for Silicon Valley or investors with the biggest bank accounts. She says that small business owners can also experience wealth and prosperity if they want to successfully exit a business. And she joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program. And I'm super excited today to talk to you about exiting a business, my friend. Great to see you, and thank you so very much for being here.
I appreciate it. I'm so excited to have our chat.
Absolutely, my friend. And Stephanie, I know that your day job focuses on helping people successfully exit businesses and making sure that they can maximize their revenue while doing so, my friend. So I'm wondering if we can start our conversation by you telling me about your work and what makes you so fabulous, my friend.
Well, I don't know if I'm fabulous. I appreciate that. But what I love about the work, I work with small business owners and solo entrepreneurs, people who have built kind of like an expert business around their own, their own skill set. And they're usually in sort of like the mid six figures or, low seven figures range. And, they've gotten to this point in their business, maybe, 5, 7 years in, maybe a little bit longer. And they're kind of going, I don't like, this is a service based business. This business is about me. I don't really know where I go from here. And what they don't realize is that they can sell, right? They can exit their business either operationally, where they just take themselves out of the business, or they can sell assets inside their business. They can sell the entire entity. They have options and they can do more. Usually the exit conversation is like a bro driven VC, that kind of conversation. And so they don't think about it. But what I want them to understand is that they have options. They can do something with this business. So what I do is I work with them long before they're actually at the point of exiting to back out of an exit strategy and say, what do we need to do with your business model right now to build more value, build assets inside the business so that when you get to the point that you're exiting, you have a much more valuable business to sell or valuable assets to sell that's going to give you a windfall down the road rather than always just throwing your money at marketing to get more and more income and clients in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you think are essential questions that people have to have in terms of creating a great succession plan? So, if people want to sell their businesses, what sort of questions do you think they should be asking themselves, my friend?
The first thing that they want to ask themselves is what type of exit do you want to make? And there's several different types, and people don't really realize this too. It doesn't mean that I just have to sell my entity. I don't have to sell my business. I bought a business a couple of years ago, but I just bought the assets of that business, and the lady who owns it still owns the entity. So there's options. I could do an operational exit where I just take myself out of the business. I could sell to an employee. I could have an employee, like my whole team, take over the business. I could, move this along to family. I could, there's lots of different options for them. So first of all, they need to think about what type of exit, what does that look like for you? And it can be quite personal and you can choose. Second thing is like what would make it worthwhile for you from a financial perspective? And what we tend to do is we work from a valuation perspective. And so we'll do valuation and we will say what as part of valuation, you do sort of a risk assessment, and that risk assessment affects your valuation, but also tells you where are the opportunities for you to build out more inside your business that would increase your valuation. What are the opportunities to fix things inside the business? So, and then thirdly, like, what are you going to do after? What are you going to do after you exit? What does that look like for you? And that determines what you're going to build. So there's a lot of alignment that is important in terms of creating that plan. And that alignment is very much to do with who are you as a business owner and what do you want to build inside the business? Because some of these strategies may just not suit you, may just not be something that you even think is worthwhile pursuing. So we think about a business almost like we think about a piece of real estate. Is it worth it to make the upgrades to my real estate in this way or that way? What's the payoff going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephanie, I'm curious to get your thoughts on the survey released last year by Scotiabank, which found that 31% of small business owners in Canada are planning to sell their businesses by 2030. And the survey also found that around 65% of owners have a succession plan, and 43% of those planning to sell their businesses are planning to sell their businesses between the next 6 to 12 months, my friend. So I'm curious, what immediate thoughts come to mind when you hear those trends and statistics, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I'd be curious to know what types of businesses were interviewed or actually responded, because I think there's a little bit of an inherited assumption built into those numbers that I think is not representative of that real small and micro business segment that I serve, because I don't think that they would even know that they can exit, right? And so those numbers would probably be a bit skewed to slightly bigger businesses or more established businesses. And I think also it would be interesting to know what industries they're in. Service-based businesses tend to think that they can't do an exit, that they can't sell their business, and that's actually totally untrue. So there's a market for every different type of business, and I think those numbers probably represent like a skewed demographic. But I also think, like, when I look at that, it's also surprising to me that 41%, only 41% have even thought about or planned for an exit. And I think that that shows us that a lot of people don't really know what they can do. And they're not thinking about it until the point where they feel like they need to. So, like, there's so much commentary in there, and there's so much that I would want to know about those numbers to be able to really assess them. But what I do know about this demographic is that they're largely underserved and undereducated around their options.
Yeah, absolutely. And my friend, I'm also curious to ask you. You said there's been a focus on early startups in business or early business growth, but there's been less focus on things like established businesses and what their viability is in terms of establishing their assets and what why owners feel sort of stagnant or in place. So how do you think we can change that conversation and focus to also assist established business owners as well? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, once you get past that early startup stage, you're not sexy anymore, right? And you become more sexy when you decide that you want to exit. But they're in that in between, people get really kind of stagnant and stuck because there's nothing supporting them. There's nothing that really supports them in understanding what their growth can look like. So at the end of the day, I'm in the business of growth, right? I'm in the business of growth, but I'm looking at it from a very different perspective. So what I want to make sure of is that these business owners don't get to that sort of stagnant part of their business and they're like, well, this business isn't worth anything. I have nowhere to go here. I'm just tired, and I probably just need to shut it down. And it's it's so heartbreaking because they have built this value inside their business that they don't realize they have. And that's why we talk about assets, right? We talk about these 9 different types of assets that you can have inside your business, and you likely have a bunch of them already. So what we want to do is we want to pull those out and we want to start building on them. Or you can also create a plan to create brand new assets inside your business. So I think that education and that inspiration, usually when I sit down with a business owner who's at that point, I have a lot of people who refer business owners to me they're like, oh, my friend has a business and she's just done, right? In fact, one of the businesses I was just talking about yesterday, she is actually in Windsor, and she has a successful business, but she's just like, I'm done. I just want to get rid of this business. And part of that conversation ends up being in sort of instilling new excitement into the business owner because they can see a future for them. But also we end up talking a lot about business models. We back out of the exit conversation once we figured out where they want to go. And then we start having these conversations about things that they can do with their business that might be more creative, that might inspire them. So just having this conversation ends up reigniting some of that passion inside their business because now they can see new possibilities and they can see new directions.
Yeah, and Stephanie, you've brought up a couple of times now maximizing the value in your business and outside of acquiring assets. What do you think it means to maximize adding value in your business, my friend?
So when we think about valuation, what we're talking about is what somebody will pay for, right? What somebody will pay for inside your business. And obviously, revenue, profitability, those are always going to be important. And so part of our growth strategy is always going to be about how do we build growth inside your revenue and your profitability. But there's also things like diversification of your channels, diversification of your audiences. And when we start to look at the areas of risk, where can I create something inside the business that's going to impact that valuation down the road? Even if I never sell, even if I have no intention to sell, it's still a great way to start looking at my growth strategy because it totally changes what you're spending your money on. A lot of these business owners will just pile money into marketing strategies because they think, oh, it's going to get me more revenue. Why don't you pile your resources into creating something that grows in value? Like I have a client right now who's building an event, right? And that she intends to run every year. It's a retreat. That becomes a product. That becomes an asset that she could sell. She could build the brand around it. She could put all the systems in place to, create value within that brand. And then she could sell that event, right? So that's the kind of stuff like we're talking about is rather than just throw all your money into ads or to, that's a hamster wheel, right? That's a cycle. Yes, we want to create sustainable new growth in your revenue, but also what are the things that are going, it's like a piece of real estate. What can I invest in my business that's actually going to grow in value that could eventually be sold for a much greater sum of money than just piling more and more income into my business?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Stephanie, data from the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses found that 76% of small business owners are planning to exit their business within the next decade, with many citing retirement as the main reason why. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that statistic and why you think that business owners need to have a successful succession plan before they retire. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I think that's very much about getting something out of what you've spent all of your life building, right? Or so many years building. Why would you just walk away from it? Why would you just let it sort of, become nothing? So I think this intention to exit just based on retirement, I don't think that that's necessarily the complete conversation. I think there's lots of people who, I have a friend who's probably 35 and she's already at that stage where she's like, yeah, I want to exit my business in the next couple of years because I've been building it for 10 years and I'm sort of done with it, right? I'm not the right person to take it to the next level of growth. So there's a real timing thing that where there's an optimal time to be thinking about exiting, not even so much about market conditions, but about who you are and what journey you're on as a business owner. I think we don't think about ourselves and our businesses enough and how that is so closely coupled, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephanie, I'm going to ask you this question because later next month I am giving a presentation to a group of service providers who assist job seekers with disabilities find and maintain work, my friend. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on the avenue of small business and entrepreneurship and the I guess the avenues it can open for folks with disabilities, and your
Mm.
message to service providers who are helping these individuals find work about the power of entrepreneurship and creating both inclusion and independence into the job market. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Oh my goodness, you're going to get me on a soapbox, aren't you?
It's a subject I know that we're both passionate about, so I wanted to make sure I asked you that question for sure.
Yeah, I love the question, and I'm so honored that you asked it of me. And I think that there are so many reasons. So my whole purpose is, to ensure that everyone possible who's interested or wants to can, follow the entrepreneurship path. Because I think at a fundamental level, it really changes us socially, culturally, and completely changes the playing field in terms of work, right? And so when we talk about mums or parents, when we talk about people who have other constraints, this completely levels the playing field and it allows us to contribute and make an impact in a very successful way, regardless of what the constraints are that we have. That keeps us much happier. It allows us to spend time with our kids. It allows us to use our brains in ways that are super impactful. And no matter what our constraints are, we can deliver value, right? We can deliver value in ways that are meaningful to us that we can't necessarily do inside of a job, inside of a bigger corporation. So whether it's accessibility, whether it is, like there are a lot of people with a lot of mental health struggles too that I really have a hard time working in a traditional environment. There are, we have the business I bought, we actually serve service-based business owners and help them build business foundations. And one of the programs that we have is called We Can Work, and we target and we work with organizations that are trying to help people work and develop careers that can't work in a traditional environment. And so one of our partner organizations works with people who have cystic fibrosis and who are unable to go and work within a regular, a 9 to 5, a big commute, that sort of thing. And so we're teaching them how to build their own businesses so that they can be productive, so that they can make an income on their own, because they're completely capable of doing it, but they physically would be constrained in terms of going into that kind of environment. So entrepreneurship for me opens up so many doors and so many levels and allows us to be closer to our communities and to the people that we really want to serve and create actually meaningful work. So there's so much to this, and it's probably another 2-hour conversation for us to have at some point in time. But I believe really strongly in entrepreneurship, just for a lot of different reasons other than, money or growth or that kind of thing. I think socially, culturally, from a community perspective, it really, really changes the quality of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just building on your last answer, I also think it provides people with exceptionalities and other entrepreneurs with a sense of both societal and business identity. So I'm curious, what does it mean to you to maximize your business identity? What does that mean to you?
To maximize your business identity.
Yeah, from a social
Oh,
or social economic perspective and a personal perspective as well. What does that mean to you?
oh, okay. You're asking me such good questions. I love this. So, my background is in business model design, is in organizational design. In the corporate world, I do consulting around organizational design, and so this all was driven from that perspective for business model design. And the work that I do with my clients when we go and we revisit their business models, we go right back to who they are as individuals. Because I'll tell you, if you build a business that's not aligned with who you are as an individual, you are building a business you don't want to grow. And a lot of like the standard approach to business in all of the courses or the whatever education that you're going to take says, start with the client and build out from there. That's not necessarily true for everybody. So yes, we want to align our offers with what our clients need, but when you start there, that might not be the motivation. I always know that when I was getting coaching or I was working with somebody, they would always say, well, who's your ideal client? And I'm like, but it doesn't matter. Like, that's not what drives me. I'm driven by the way that I want to work. I'm driven by the way that I want to, I want to interact with my clients. That's my pillar of passion. And so I kind of developed this model where I figured out there's sort of these 4 pillars of passion inside of a business. It could be the type of client that you want to work, and that's what drives you. It could also be the offer that you've created, and that's what drives you. I own a software company, and that's ours. We've built a product. It could be this particular skill or set of experiences that you have that has to be the primary pillar, or it's the way that you want to work. For me, it's the way that I want to work. That's what drives me. So yes, I have preferences in those other pillars, and we want to build for all of them. But if we don't get that right, that all the work we do after that has to be aligned, right? It has to be aligned with who you are, what you value, what your pillar is, because if it's not, that's the gut punch. That's the gut punch. And you're going to build, if I did that and I built from the customer out, I'd have built a business that I really didn't like. Right. So we get back to the core of who you are as a business owner, because that's the footprint that you have to build from. And that influences everything else that you create inside your business. If it doesn't, you're not going to grow. You're not going to be successful because you're going to be hating every step of the way.
And Stephanie, what do you think is the key, or what do you think is the right time to exit a business? What are your thoughts there?
Oh, that's a very difficult question to answer because it's mostly about you being ready. right? So you could build a business and exit it 5 years later. You could build a business and exit it 25 years later. But it's when you're ready and when you are in a place that like everything's sort of lined up to your expectations. And that's going to be different for everybody. So are you ready? Are you the business that I bought? She if she had run it for another year, it would have just closed down because she just was done, right? And so she was ready to exit. A lot of people that I work with are like, I'm not ready to exit yet, but I want to be prepared for it, and I want to build now for a successful exit down the road. So I think that when you're starting to feel that real stagnant feeling or that almost resentful, when you're seeing like a decline in growth in your business, it's often because that you've lost momentum or you're not sure where to go from here. And when we don't have that vision, that's a really hard place to grow from. So I think you can reinstill that vision if you have a longer term strategy. So I would say just be careful about getting into a place where you're like, I'm so done, I'm just going to sell my business right now, because you're going to get a lot less value for it than if you do this really intentionally. So I think it's a real combination of, I have a whole exit readiness assessment that I have that people can go and fill out, but it goes through all of these different components of, financial readiness and, your vision as a human being, and, the business in terms of like how mature are your offers and how mature are your services, how much have you codified inside the business, what kind of assets have you built already. So there's all these different pieces that can contribute to understanding how ready you are to exit.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I also ask you your opinion between the difference between valuing a business versus your own personal or professional validation of a business? Because I think when you value something, looking to get validation from it, it sometimes can be a bit of a gray area. So I'm wondering if you can sort of separate that for me in terms of validation versus valuation. What are your thoughts then?
You ask such great questions, Kevin. This is an amazing question, because when we talk about value, what we're trying to get to the place of is making this a bit neutral, right? Like not emotional or not, a guessing game, right? So that's why we really come from a valuation perspective, because what that does is it says, you may think that this thing is really valuable, but at the end of the day, if we're using like a standardized valuation technique, which is usually SDE for these types of businesses, then this changes. You may think it's really valuable to do this thing over here, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't affect the value of the business when you want to go and exit, what is the point of doing it, right? And there might be a really good answer to that question, that it just feels really good to do it. Great, do it, right? Do it. It adds more value to your clients. Great, do it. But just be clear on how much it's going to actually affect your valuation. So that's why we want to have a very sort of neutral and fact-based place to make decisions from. And then when we back into that and you make a decision in your business about something you're going to do, at least you know what kind of decision you're making. Is it something that's going to ultimately affect the valuation of my business, what's considered valuable by a buyer? Or is it something I'm building because I'm passionate about it and I just really want to build it inside my business, which ultimately might affect your revenue, because if you think it's valuable, your clients might think it's valuable too. So that's validation. Whereas value, we're trying to make it not subjective, right? We're trying to, and you may not like what valuation says about your business, but you get to choose, right? You get to make a decision that I'm going to build something for that ultimate valuation, even if it's not necessarily the thing that I would have thought to build. I just want to put all of the options on the table and help people make clear decisions, because I think that they can't right now. They don't know, like they have guesses, but they don't know the facts, and they don't know, like they're not coming from a data focused perspective.
Yeah, and revisiting the question of can a small business owner really sell their business and making a profit? And I'm curious to get your thoughts on how we shift the mindset of small business owners when they can really capitalize on selling their business. What are your thoughts there?
This is an education problem, right? Because I think nobody talks to these business owners. This is my goal, is to make sure everybody knows this, but nobody talks to these business owners because they're not the ones who are going to be in making, well, maybe they will, but they're not necessarily of interest to the VCs or the big brokers or whatever, because nobody, like, they're not going to, have a multi-trillion dollar exit. But I've bought $500 businesses. I have bought, $180,000 business. Like, there is a market for any type of business. And what we want to do is we want to prepare that business to be as valuable to that market as possible. So I want people to understand that there are all these different ways to sell a business. So the program that I've built called Assets to Exits would have a whole foundational core course in there that goes through all of this and gives people that education so that they understand that there are options for themselves. So you can sell any type of business. It's about how you're positioning. It's about how you've built it to be attractive to a seller or to a buyer.
Yeah, and, Stephanie, what do you think is the number one thing that small business owners can do to stimulate growth in their business? What are your thoughts there?
Well, it's just what we talked about. It's understanding what's going to be effective growth and not chasing marketing strategies. Like, yeah, that's part of it for sure. But if understand what type of growth that you want to make. If all you're trying to do is build more revenue and just continue to build more revenue, sure, go buy ads or take go pursue partnerships. There's lots of more sustainable strategies. But I think you have to understand what kind of growth you want and whether you want to have revenue growth or whether you want to have revenue and asset growth inside your business, and pursue a strategy that's going to support both of those things. But just be smart about your growth so that you're working towards something as opposed to just chasing revenue. Because that's a
Yeah,
no end game, right?
absolutely. And my friend, when we talk about service-based businesses, you talked earlier about the difference between service-based businesses and small, medium-sized businesses. So I'm curious, when we look at specifically service-based businesses, what do you think is the key to building wealth in that sort of a business?
Codifying your work, right? So a lot of people come to me and they're service based business owners. They're the ones delivering the services, and they're like, well, how could I ever sell this? So what they just don't have the experience to see that there are lots of ways of productizing their services, that there are ways of taking, like, they've already built a bunch of assets inside their business just by nature of the fact that they're delivering these services. They probably have, processes documented. They probably have, audience lists. They probably have content that they've created that can all be turned into valuable assets. And so, I think this is about looking at your business and your business model and trying to figure out how you get more leverage. There's so many different ways. Like, you can create licensable IP, you can create, training programs out of your frameworks that you've created. This just takes somebody who has the experience to be able to look at your business and say, I see where all these different assets are. And the document that I've shared with you, the 9 types of assets you can build inside your business, is a great place to start. So you can start looking at the services and what you've created inside your business and thinking about how to add other dimensions to those and leverage what you have created already.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephanie, I'm curious to tell you a story before I ask you my next question. So, Stephanie, I used to serve as the lead job developer at the YMCA here in Windsor, Essex County, and for better or for worse, my desk was directly across from my boss, right? And I had one day when I went home, I entered one of her emails at like 8 or 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and I went in the next day, and she said, just because an email is in your inbox doesn't necessarily mean that you have to answer it right away. And I think, that story relates to small business owners in the sense that, managing stress and burnout, because especially
Mm.
when you first start a business, you want to immediately answer a client or an order or something to grow the notoriety of your business. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the importance of managing stress and burnout as a business owner. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, I had a similar experience. It took me a long time to learn this lesson. I also grew up in the dot com era. I was right in it, and it was the most fun and the most rewarding time of my career. But we would work 7 days a week, literally 20 hours a day. And that was how I was sort of grown up as a professional. And I remember one day being at the office. I was consulting into a big, resources company, and I was there at like 10 o'clock at night. And the guy I was working with came in and he goes, "Go home." He goes, "We're not saving lives." And I was like, but. He goes, "We're not saving, nobody's going to die if you don't finish this tonight." And I'm like, "Oh, you're right." And it took me a really long time to get to that place where I was like, quite resilient in terms of the work that I do and really holding boundaries around the work that I do and realizing that me like killing myself working was not going to result in and probably would result in less effective results than if I was, balancing all this stuff out. What I think, and if I'm going to make this perspective sort of fit with my own narrative, I actually think part of the reason people burn out is that they don't see the vision, right? They don't see the future and they don't see the future path. There's a book I read last year, which I, reluctantly read because it was very like, it came across very bro and very like, "Ooh," right? And it's called 10X is Easier Than 2X. And, it's Grant Cardone. Like it's actually a very good book. I don't know that the writing is amazing, but the concept is, listen, what would it take to 10x your business? Like, what would that look like? Are you going to do that? Not necessarily, but when you start thinking that way, you start realizing that I'm spending all this time doing things that might take me to 2x, right? And all these little like fiddly day to day that really are not going to move me forward in big ways. If I really thought about 10xing my business, I would be focusing on far different strategies and much bigger things. And it stopped me. It just like completely took all the stuff off my plate that I was worrying so much about that would never be moving us forward in any bigger way. And it opened me up to be able to see a vision that was far more exciting for me and that I could really like be more effective working towards. That shift, I think, is what takes us out of this burnout because it stops us from all of the like the chasing things that are not really effective, but it also gives us some energy towards something that feels like it's progress. Because when we feel like we're not making progress, when we feel like we're stuck, when we feel like we're not like when we're in this hamster wheel, that's when we get burnt out because we don't have any sort of vision, right? So I think there's a huge piece of that. We could get into a whole conversation about, how we work and how we prioritize our work and how we manage our work and whether we delegate and that sort of thing. But I think that people get really stuck doing what they think they need to do. And sometimes they just need that bigger conversation to see the possibility and the impact that they can make with a different business model.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephanie, after someone sells a business and they get the influx of funds from selling a business, whether they want to start a new venture or plan for retirement, I'm curious to ask you, how do you advise your clients to effectively manage that new sort of influx of money? What are your thoughts there?
Well, the trick here is to not make that decision after you've gotten the money. When I work with my clients, we have a whole like exit preparation and exit readiness process that we'll go through long before we create like an offer letter or put the business up for sale. We go through a post exit strategy, so what's going to happen once you exit, what you're going to do with yourself, how you're going to manage the mindset stuff, how you're going to manage the money, what are you going to do with it? You need a plan, right? Because a lot of people get out of their business and they feel like they have no validate, they have no purpose, like they're a flag in the wind, right? Some people are just like, yeah, I'm out of here, like let me rest, right? But for most people, it's a real loss of like purpose, and they sometimes will just go into new burnout because they'll throw themselves into some other project, or they'll feel a lot of regret and remorse. So I think there's actually a lot of mindset work to be done before they actually exit because you want them to be prepared with a plan for, what they're going to do with their time, what they're going to do, with their intellectual stimulation. Maybe they just go into a little writing project for a while and like codify some of their knowledge and experiences, let themselves rest. And what do you do with the money, right? So I think having all of that in place before you actually go into your exit is super, super important. And it's actually an offer I have that where we do a post exit strategy before you actually go into buying.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important, my friend. And, selfishly, I want to ask you this next question because, outside of hosting this podcast, I also do some professional speaking about workforce diversity and inclusion, my friend. And, there's a sign in my office that says that life is a constant game of networking. So, with all of your business experience, my friend, I'm curious to ask you, what's the key to establishing great business relationships and starting a new business conversation? My friend, what are your thoughts there?
I'm going to say there's two things. One of them is curiosity, and the other one is to be very organized about organizing your network. And this is something I'm developing right now. I'm building a whole growth operating system, right? Because I've got all these little tools I've created over the years. Like these are my assets that I've built inside my business for my own purposes. One of them is a network development strategy. And what gets really interesting to me is that I've got all these different places that I know people, right? And we don't realize how many people we know. And so I've started pulling them all into one place, categorizing them all, having a process for getting them automatically fed into. And what's so interesting is that when I started to look at everybody in one place, I had like 8,000 contacts. And I've been going through and I've been, categorize them all as, are they referral partners? Are they collaboration partners? Are they potential customers? Are they past customers? And then what do I do with those people? So it's, networking and building your network can feel very much like an unstructured sort of, just throw spaghetti at the wall kind of thing. But when you actually start structuring it and turning it into a process and looking at your data, it gets really, really interesting. And then you can very like systematically go through all of your contacts and figure out, what do I want to do with this person? What do I want to do with that person? And then it just builds and builds and builds. So, and then you get to choose what your visibility strategies are. Is it podcasting? Is it, collaborations? Is it, speaking? Is it, writing together, co-creation, whatever it might be. But I think the curiosity is a super important part of that because every single person knows people, right? And you just never know where your next referral is going to come from, where your next, you know, opening up of an audience is going to come from. So I think you have to look at every contact with curiosity and just get into a conversation. Like people try to structure these conversations too much, but it's really just about being a human being and showing up and having connection, right?
Absolutely. My friend, I've got two questions left for you. The first of the two is a two-part question. I'm curious to ask you, my friend, what do you think is the best part about living and doing business in Canada, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Well, funny enough, I do business in Canada, but I have actually don't have that many Canadian clients. And my clients are all over the world. I've got clients in Austria, I've got clients in Portugal, I've got clients in lots in the US, I've got clients in the UK. I think we have a lot of social capital, we have a lot of cultural capital, and we tend to be just really like neutral and kind people. And so I think like it puts me in a really great position to have these conversations with folks that are not charged, right? And to be able to relate to a lot of different people. Like it's an interesting time to be having this conversation with all of the turmoil that's going on right now economically and politically. And it's going to be, I think that answer to that question might be very different if you asked me it in a year. But I just think like I like to be part of someone who lives in a little small Canadian town, but can operate on a very, international scale. And I feel very safe about that. And I feel like we're in a place where, we can do that from a very neutral perspective without it being, politically or socially charged. But this, I'm really proud of where we're from, and I'm really proud of our country, and I think we represent it in a great way, in terms of opportunities and in terms of our our social and political spectrum, right? But again, ask
Yeah.
me that in a year, who knows?
Well, I'll ask you that in three and a half, two, when we have a new U.S. president too. Okay. And my friend, I want to ask you to end our conversation about women's empowerment and your own legacy in life and business from a personal and professional standpoint, my friend. How do you want your legacy to be remembered from both a personal and professional standpoint? And what are your thoughts on the strides that women have made from an empowerment standpoint when it comes to business and in life, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
I wish I could say that it's been a lot, but unfortunately, I get to see how far we still have to go. I've never been somebody who, felt restricted or held back. I would encourage you to go listen to my latest podcast episode on my own show where I spoke about sort of becoming reluctantly no, not reluctantly feminine anymore, but femininity and feminine power and women do business in different ways than men do. And I grew up in the IT industry and the technology sector. And for the first 20 years, no, first, 15 years of my career, I felt really conflicted because I would work in a way that was very natural to me, which was I make relationships really quickly. I like connect with people really quickly. And I would go into these like corporate meetings with big organizations and I would just build relationships right off the bat. But my male counterparts would always tell me, you can't do that. That's too familiar. We have to go in and fight, right? We have to fight for this. But I was always the one that closed the deals. I was always the one that got the projects going. I was the one who formed these sort of really loyal relationships with the clients because I would just lean into what I did naturally and with my intuition. If I tried to function and operate as a strong male, it just didn't work, right? Like it was just that was my superpower. Now that I work almost entirely with women, I can lean into that and I can use that. But I find it really interesting when I do work with men how different the conversation is. So, women's empowerment, I don't know, like how I feel about that because I feel like we're still not making the progress that we really want to make. I see it in the corporate world and it's really disappointing. And I had this conversation with someone the other day where I was like, I just want to get out of the corporate world altogether because it's just so frustrating to see just how stuck we still are on middle-aged white men being and their power struggles. And I said, but I can't leave because I want to make the difference. And my friend said to me, like, how is that good for you? Right? Maybe you can just make a difference somewhere else and not put yourself through that frustration and torture. And that felt really hard for me to let that go because I wanted to be the one who was crusading. But I'm turning 50 this year and I just I want happiness, I want flow, and so maybe my focus turns to creating an environment where women can be powerful and women can lean into the things that they do really, really well. And a lot of my work, I feel, has been, helping women grow into that. And I think in my other business, I see a lot of our demographic has really changed to be almost primarily women my age or older who are just getting to the sort of like last stages of their career and they're like, I don't want to serve someone else anymore. I want to show that I could do this for myself. And they can, right? And it's so inspiring and it's so amazing to watch. So maybe my job is to not necessarily change things in the corporate world, but to provide opportunities in that for women to just, I'm not going to be the crusader marching down the street and going, yay, women. I just want to support them. I want to make those changes happen and make them real. But we are nowhere near where we should be. And we're going backwards really quickly, I think. So, I think that there's a real difference between what we talk about and what we do. And sometimes these programs and these campaigns don't actually do anything to help women be more successful and more empowered. I think we actually have to be running programs that make that change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my friend, before I say goodbye to you, I have to tell you, you look fabulous at 50, by the way. Okay.
Thank you. Don't look
So,
too close.
well, my birthday was last month, and I'm holding on to the title of veteran young guy for as long as I can. Okay.
My daughter turned 17 this week, and it was a like 16, she still felt like a kid. 17 feels like, wow, I'm old. and
Yes.
it and she feels like a real like she's very grown up and she's very mature, but it really felt like a transition, like oh my God, I've got an adult child now.
What I wouldn't give to be 17 again, right?
Oh no, no,
Oh,
you couldn't pay me enough. No, thank you. I'm very happy
yes.
where I am.
Well, with age comes experience, right?
That's right.
Absolutely. So, my friend, finally tell me if people want to listen to your podcast or get connected with assets to exits, what's the best way they can do that?
On my website, stephaniehayes.biz, it is going to be getting a big facelift very shortly. So you can connect with me there, or I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Links to my podcast are there. We're just starting the podcast back up again, and also starting a couple of new podcasts as well. So it's going to be a really exciting year.
Absolutely. Well, my friend, I have to tell you, this was a very dynamic and fun way to end my week of conversations. And I want to thank you for the progress that you've made in terms of making business and business exits more inclusive for a larger swath of our population. I want to thank you for being here and for engaging in conversation with me. It's most appreciated.
Thank you, Kevin. It was a wonderful interview.